The Witch's Labyrinth horror story. The night of October 31, known as Witch's Night, was arriving, and the atmosphere was filled with a mysterious and chilling air. The cemetery, located near our house, was preparing for the Day of the Dead. People placed offerings on the graves to honor their deceased. My parents decided to fix the grave of my maternal grandparents, whom my sister Andre and I, Nick, loved dearly. We wanted to help, but we were also drawn to the beauty of the cemetery, so we asked permission to take a walk and admire the offerings. Although there were rumors that it was dangerous to be in cemeteries during that night, since spirits and witches roamed freely, both Andrea and I did not believe in such superstitions. We were not afraid at all. Not to mention, this was the first year we were old enough for my parents to let us walk around the cemetery on our own, and we really wanted to take advantage of it. There was a legend for which that cemetery was well known. According to legend, the Witch's Labyrinth was a place where ancestral witches had been buried in ancient times. It was said that during Halloween, these witches were resurrected and gathered in the labyrinth to perform dark rituals and evil spells. People believed that power and darkness emanated from that place, making it a magnet for supernatural forces. Legend had it that the entrance to the Witch's Labyrinth was only revealed on the Day of the Dead, once a year, when the barrier between the world of the living and the realm of the spirits was thinnest. My parents gave us permission to go exploring as long as we didn't take too long, so we hurriedly ran before they added any other conditions. Touring the tombs and marveling at the decorations, we reached the bottom of the cemetery. There, in front of us, was a cave we had never seen before. It was hidden in the brush, but someone had cleared the way that night. The large moon illuminated the sky and allowed the entrance to the cave to be seen clearly. Curious, we looked out and noticed a bright light inside, which caused us great curiosity and intrigue. The legend had never mentioned any cave, not to mention that my sister told me that she had seen that cave before, only that the entrance was so overgrown that she knew it would be impossible to enter it. Without hesitation, Andre and I, being twins and understanding each other with just a look, decided to go in and explore the cave. We advanced cautiously through a narrow passage where the ground was wet and slippery. Even so, we continued advancing until we reached a huge, illuminated but enigmatic cavern. We couldn't see the ceiling, as it was too high, and we could only make out a black mass moving up there. The stalactites glowed mysteriously in the light, creating a magical atmosphere. However, our admiration was interrupted when the black mass, which we discovered very late, was bats, suddenly descended on us. Thousands of them flew madly around us, while we screamed in fear. Luckily, the bats found their way out of the cave and disappeared. We both breathed a sigh of relief. We continue exploring the cavern. The light that illuminated the place came from torches strategically placed on the walls, creating dancing shadows that seemed to have life. Relieved, we went even further into the cavern, captivated by the mysterious atmosphere that surrounded it. As we walked forward, we heard a soft, subtle rustling that seemed to come from everywhere at once. We stopped and looked at each other, wondering if the other had heard it too. The whisper became clearer and more distinct. It seemed to be some kind of invocation or spell in a language unknown to us. We slowly approached the source of the sound, following the voices that seemed to call us. As we cautiously moved forward, we realized that the cavern was filled with mystical symbols and markings. Enigmatic drawings adorned the walls, depicting ancient rituals and spells. Every step we took immersed us more in the mystery and magic of that place. Suddenly, we heard a soft whisper that seemed to come from the depths of the cavern. We followed the sound and went even further until we reached a small opening in the wall. Peeking out, we saw a hidden room illuminated by a single flickering candle. It was then when we noticed a strange, large rectangular stone in the center of that room. On its flat surface, it looked like a sacrificial stone, as Andrea mentioned while we were trying to catch our breath. Not believing in superstitions, I sat on the stone to show my sister that there was nothing to fear. She imitated me, and we sat together. Suddenly, we heard strange chants echoing in the cavern. Hooded figures emerged from every corner, all dressed in black. Still chanting their litany, they surrounded us and then removed their hoods. A scream of horror escaped our lips as we saw their deformed faces. They were horrible witches, with some white hair hanging from their skulls and greenish skin. Their eyes were large, and in some of them, blind and white. His hands, thin and with long, sharp nails, resembled claws. The witches began to sing and dance around us. At that moment, out of nowhere, snakes came out of the stone and wrapped around us, imprisoning our bodies. It was evident that we would become the sacrifices of that witch's night. Terror took hold of us. Desperate to escape that nightmare, Andre and I looked for a way to free ourselves from the snakes that imprisoned us. In an act of bravery and desperation, we struggled and twisted until we were free from its porch's clutches. However, when we looked towards the exit of the cave, we realized that the witches were completely covering it. We had no choice but to go even deeper into the darkness of the cave. We moved forward cautiously, our hearts racing as we explored the underground labyrinths of the cavern. The walls were wet and slippery, and we could only rely on our senses to find a way out. The echo of our footsteps resonated in the silence, constantly reminding us of the threat that surrounded us. As we advanced, we noticed that the air became increasingly heavier and laden with a foul aroma. We entered narrow, winding passages where only the dim light of our flashlights guided us. Shadows danced on the walls, fueling our growing sense of dread. Suddenly, we came to a fork in the road. Uncertain of which direction to take, we paused for a moment to evaluate our options. That's when we heard whispers coming from one of the passages. Intrigued and fearful, we decided to follow the sound, hoping to find some answer or help in that shadowy place. We moved further into the passage, following the whispers that echoed in our ears. As we moved forward, the atmosphere became more oppressive and darker, and the feeling that something sinister was watching us intensified. As we moved down the passage, the whispers intensified, becoming clearer and more distinct. They were voices that seemed to whisper spells and curses in an unknown language. The echo of our own voices was lost in the midst of that sinister chorus. Finally, we reached a large underground room illuminated by flickering candles. There, still being searched and pursued, we found an ancient book open on a stone altar. Its pages were written in an arcane language and its symbols seemed to come to life before our eyes. We didn't understand the language, but luckily on one of the pages, there seemed to be a way out of the maze, and that could be understood by simple intuition. So we decided to take the book and continue running. Desperate to escape that dark labyrinth, Andre and I ran through the narrow passages, trying to get away from the witches who were relentlessly pursuing us. Our hearts pounded as terror drove us forward. In a moment of frantic running, we arrived at a place where the walls of the cave were decorated with old paintings. The images depicted grisly scenes of sacrifices and macabre rituals. It was evident that, for many years, this place had witnessed unimaginable horrors. The paintings were vivid and detailed, showing witches performing sinister rituals while helpless bodies lay on the ground, victims of their dark practices. That shocking vision only reminded us that we were trapped in a cursed place, a sanctuary of evil that had claimed numerous lives. However, we did not have time to get carried away by the horror that the paintings emanated. The witches were still hot on our heels, their evil laughter filling the air. There was no other option but to continue moving forward in search of a way out, even though each step seemed to take us even deeper into the darkness. We ran on, our flashlights wavering as terror drove us forward. The labyrinth of passages became increasingly tangled, making our progress difficult. However, determination kept us moving, refusing to give in to the nightmare that stalked us. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of fleeing, we reached a point where the passage forked again. Choosing our next path was crucial. We opted for the passage on the right, which contained a symbol which I had previously seen in that book, and we continued running, hoping that it would lead us to freedom. As we advanced through the passage to the right, the atmosphere became more oppressive and suffocating. The air was filled with a rancid smell, and a suffocating heat enveloped us. Every step we took seemed to take us deeper into the bowels of the underground labyrinth. The passage became narrower and narrower, forcing us to advance crouching. Our hearts were pounding, and adrenaline continued to pump through our veins as we desperately searched for an exit. The evil whispers seemed to haunt us, their voices echoing in our minds, filling us with fear. We looked back and saw the stone door close behind us, as if it had swallowed the nightmare we lived through. We knew that we would never return to that place again, but we were also aware that the witches were still there, waiting for new, unsuspecting ones to venture into the witches' labyrinth. We took a few moments to catch our breath and appreciate the freedom we had gained. The full moon shone the starry sky, and its soft light illuminated the landscape spread out before us. It was a lush forest, full of tall trees and vines that intertwined with each other. We walked along the path that wound through the trees, enjoying every step that took us away from that dark and sinister place. Peace and tranquility reigned in the air, and we could feel the weight of what had happened slowly fading away. As we moved forward, we began to hear the soft sounds of nature around us. The chirping of birds, the rustling of the wind through the leaves, and the gentle murmur of a nearby stream reminded us that we were in the outside world again, far from oppression and darkness. We continued walking for a while, in no particular direction. We simply let ourselves be carried along the path, trusting that it would lead us somewhere safe and welcoming. The feeling of freedom was overwhelming and filled us with hope and renewed energy. As we relaxed, We looked up at the sky and watched the stars shining brightly. We feel grateful for having escaped from that dark place and having found this haven of peace in the middle of nature. We returned to the cemetery where our parents were waiting for us, worried. We told them about our terrifying experience, but decided to leave out some details so as not to alarm them more than necessary. Despite the scare, we feel proud of having shown courage and cunning to face that danger. From that day on, the cemetery and the witch's labyrinth became a constant warning in our minds. We learned to respect legends and not to underestimate the power of the unknown. But, above all, we learned to trust our intuition and not get carried away by blind curiosity.